Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to my thesis talk. Thank you for watching. I am out here recording on my back porch. So if you hear traffic sounds or birds chirping or my cat meowing out the window, I apologize. This is one of the only few places in my house that is quiet. There are 5 people in my house right now, so it's been crowded and hard to find space. So this is the best I could do. I also apologize if my the video feed is pretty, either slow or blurry with 5 people sharing Wi-Fi and everyone trying to work from home. It's, the internet's doing the best it can. So yeah, saying that, I just want to recognize this moment that we're in, this global pandemic and crisis. And yeah, again, thank you for watching this. I know I have really been struggling to keep working and to stay focused and do this kind of deep thinking, critical academic look at my work at a time when the inequities in our societies have been aggressively laid bare and a lot of people are really suffering and struggling. And, myself as a person with a chronic autoimmune disease that is immunocompromised, it's been really scary. So, I'm doing the best I can, and yeah, I really appreciate your time here today. Okay, so let's get into my show. I'm gonna do this thing where I share my screen with you. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to talk about my thesis work, which has become this show currently installed at a gallery space called No Land in Santa Fe. And I'm going to start this talk by reading the text that is hung outside the gallery space for you to see as you come into the space. This work comes from a place of abundant gratitude. This work comes from pain and anger and shame. This work is a moment in a continuous striving, not for perfection, but for something better. I come to this work as a white woman with a chronic illness and a sleeping eating disorder. I come to this work deeply indebted to the art, scholarship, and activism of many, especially women, folks of color, queer, trans, and non-binary folks. I come to this work from a place of openness, attempting to hold myself accountable, attempting to be better. I am here as a white person trying to reckon with my existence on stolen land, especially this specific place on the unceded land of the Pueblo peoples, the site of the Pueblo Rebellion, surrounded by sovereign nations and centuries of indigenous rebellion and protest. I am here as a citizen of the United States, trying to reckon with this country's existence, which was only made possible by centuries of land theft, broken treaties, enslavement, systemic racism, and militarized borders. I am here as a human questioning the injustices, human exceptionalism, imperialism, and ecological exploitation and commodification required under capitalism. This work comes from a place of grief, of fear for the future, of resilience, of hope, of dreaming of a better world. This work is full of questions posed and lacking in answers. This work is all that I have. When I was trying to think about how I could talk and share this work with you in this format, you know, one in which none of you have actually really seen the show. And then, you know, trying to explain my process, I thought that it would be really essential for me to go back and try to show you some of the huge leaps I have made as an artist, in both how I create my work and how I think about and present my work since the beginning of grad school. So I'm going to show you some of the first things I made here. When I first got to UNM, I had really just recently been in a very bad car accident that could have easily been fatal. So I was dealing a lot with death and thinking about the ephemerality of these fleshy vessels that inhabit our beings. So I was making works such as this one, that were, you know, these very transparent, hollow vessels, typically made out of more fragile materials. I was using a lot of paper. Like this piece is made out of, it's just a tube of packing paper, perforated packing paper. Let's see. Thinking about, yeah, the ephemerality of the human body, making these discrete sculptural objects. This piece was plastic coated in polyurethane that I had pulled apart to make this kind of like wrinkly, like fatty looking kind of tissue appearing sculptural object that was slumping against a wall. I was thinking about preservation, these things that we do to imagine ourselves to be more permanent than we actually are. And then, yeah, after a lot of those works, you can see this. This was a piece that I installed. I installed all of these pieces in what is now Welly Fletcher's studio space, but was then called the Firehouse Gallery for us. But this was a crumpled tissue paper tube. I think I called it tremulous vessel. It's been a while. That was hung over an I-beam in that space. And it moved and swayed with just the movement of other bodies. I was thinking about the frailty of our own bodies and how malleable we are based upon the spaces that we are in and who is in that space with us. This was another tissue paper piece that I did, thinking about the medicalization of the body and the ways that we intervene and try to preserve these pieces of us, and how pieces of our bodies become specimens. So in my second semester, I moved away from making just isolated sculptural objects and was doing these installations that included projected videos of performative works, performative actions that I was doing, along with sculptural objects that were artifacts of those performative actions. And then this is another piece that was in my second semester review. I called it Sometimes It's Hard to Breathe. And this is, I just want to read a segment of the artist statement that I had at that time for this work. There's a lot of parallels between what I was thinking about then and then what I'm doing now in my thesis work. But this is what I said at that time. I make sculpture and video that investigate the connections between our mortal, corporeal bodies and our intellectual, emotional, spiritual selves. In the past decade, I overcame an eating disorder while living with a chronic degenerative autoimmune disease that affects my daily functionality, my skin, my weight, my fertility, and my longevity. As a result, I have a unique perspective on the potential constraints and limitations of the human body and the pressures and assumptions on the feminine body. My particular relationship with my corporeal existence is twofold. My eating disorder pulled me out of my body and made it an object, while my arthritis wrenches me back and locks me inside. My body is both container and contained. It is a corporeal object in space, as well as an unseeable and unknowable interior subject. This work is an attempt to comprehend mortality. The pieces I am presenting are saturated with the memory of my body, yet my body is obviously not present in the work. The viewer is only allowed to see the evidence of an action, not the action itself, creating a corporeal tension between the presence and absence that approximates my understanding of death. There is a tangible presence of the departed after death in memories and former possessions that reinforces their absence. I am attempting to reference this experience through my performative artifacts. Video becomes memory, sculpture becomes relic of life. So while I was making that work that I just showed you, I was also having my first encounters with the Kentucky coffee tree. This video was shot like 2 years and 1 month ago, almost exactly. And it was the first time that I recorded any kind of interaction of myself with these pods. I was finding them on my walk between my house and the art building on campus, and I just started compulsively collecting the pods. I thought they were incredibly beautiful objects. And that was really my first introduction to this new line of work where I was going to be really changing the way that I make and the way that I even think about art. So I spent a lot of time collecting the seeds and the pods of this tree. And then in doing so, I began to research this species because I didn't even know what I was looking at. And it was at this time that I found that the Kentucky coffee trees are a proposed example in theory of evolutionary anachronisms. The tough, leathery seed pods are highly toxic, too thick for most animals to chew, and too heavy for either wind or water dispersal. It is thus believed that the tree would have been browsed upon by mammoths, mastodons, ground sloths, and other now extinct megafaunas. These dead giants would have been able to eat the pods whole, nicking the seeds with their large molars before moving them through their bodies and depositing them in waste, prompting germination. And then Connie Barlow, in her essay, Anachronistic Fruits and the Ghosts Who Haunt Them, says that anachronistic plants are, quote, living in a time warp. They are adapted to a lost world. Their missing partners are the ghosts of evolution. And then in her book entitled The Ghosts of Evolution, she points to the Kentucky coffee tree as an example of an extreme anachronism. And this resonated with me on a number of levels. At this time, I was trying to adjust to my life after leaving my partner of 6 years, the person I was engaged to. And it was summer, and I had the amazing privilege of having received a really large tax refund that year for some reason. So I didn't have to have a daily job. So I had a lot of time, and I was grieving and mourning, not only for this person that I lost, but this life that I thought I was going to have that I realized was never going to become a future. I was mourning a future as well as a past. So I was thinking about these beings, these trees, and their pods in a way that was deeply personal to me. And in doing so, I found these other parallels between us, thinking about how their seeds and pods are so hardy, they're so overbuilt. They're made to live in a world where they were being eaten by these giants, so they're overprotected to the point where it's harmful to the species now. The tree is becoming incredibly rare because their mutualist partner, their dispersal agent, has been gone for over 10,000 years. And I was thinking about that in relation to my body with my rheumatoid arthritis as something also overbuilt to the point of detriment. My immune system is overactive. It's trying too hard to the point that it harms me. So through all this thinking and collecting, I was just spending an immense amount of time with these trees, and I began to really appreciate them as individual beings that I was in relationship with. There's this quote from Richard Carbon in his essay in The Language of Plants, where he says, quote, "Plants respond to cues from distant tissues in the same individual." In the same individual, from other individuals, and even from different species. Although we know little about the language of plants, it appears to be extremely complex, using many different modalities, visual, electrical, and chemical cues, and capable of conveying sophisticated information about both past and future events. So through all this time and research I was doing, I really began to appreciate the plants and the trees themselves as intelligent, complex beings that I could try to be in relationship with. So obviously, I was trying to, this was a lot of information that I was dealing with that I had never put into my work before. The way I was working was really intuitive through material experiments and processes, and based upon working through my own interior subjective experience. So I was really trying to grapple with how to make work that was included what I was going through and my experience with the trees, but also is all this information and research about the trees themselves. This was a piece that I presented in the Land Arts of the American West show in 2018. And where I tried to fit everything in, all of this in, and I don't think it worked. But through working with this piece, I came to realize that I needed, in order for me as an artist to even comprehend what I was trying to make, I had to pull out these different threads and focus each piece that I was making on one thing in particular. So that's really what I did, moving into my qualifying work. And then, so one of the really important threads that I was isolating and pulled out was thinking about, these trees as complex beings with their own value and worth, and my relationship with them. So for the relationship to not be one-sided, me just taking what I needed from them and appreciating them, I wanted to think about what actions I could commit to that would be reciprocal, me trying to reciprocate the care that I was receiving from the trees. So I began to grow Kentucky coffee trees. The seeds are really hard to germinate, but by cultivating these lives, I gained a really deep, rich understanding of the life cycle of these plants, and my relationship with them changed really drastically. In my qualifying, I gave away 3 trees to committee members who wanted them. So growing the trees and giving them away felt really important. Another one of those threads was thinking about, my body, me grappling with my body and the parallel between myself and the seed pods. So this piece that I called Seed Mouth, this was an early iteration of what ended up in my qualifying exam. But this was me performing an action to try to compare my body to the body of seed pods. Seed pods as these, as vessels, containers for life and potentials that you can't see from the outside, that are inherently breakable and made to be broken. They are, by definition, temporary, in this very similar way to the human body. But I was also, with this work, trying to more directly compare my specific body with my rheumatoid arthritis to the seed pod. Additionally, I was also commenting upon the impossibility of me ever actually really being a seed pod in this piece. This was a work that I called Words No Longer Heard, where I was thinking about vegetal language. These pods, I came through my research into vegetal language and vegetal communication. I came to realize that these pods themselves are the trees speaking. They're the trees speaking with their physical beings. They've changed their bodies in order to communicate with the megafauna that were the intended dispersers of these seeds. So by presenting the pods in this structure of poems, I borrowed the specific structure of these poems from C.K. Williams, 2 poems in his book called Falling Ill, which he wrote after he received a terminal cancer diagnosis. And those poems had really resonated with me trying to grapple with my own illness. But by putting the pods in this poetic structure, I wanted to make the correlation between the pods themselves as carriers of meaning, even if no beings exist anymore who hear them the way that the trees intended them to be heard. But it's still language. Another one of those themes that I pulled out was the body in pain. Specifically, and this was, I made this sack out of white cotton mesh that was being perforated and cut open by these pods, trying to contain the containers. Another thing that I was thinking about was these larger systems and how we create value of species. So through the research, I found that the Kentucky coffee tree is grown as urban shade trees because they are incredibly hardy. They're pollution resistant and drought resistant, and they do really well in these tough human-made environments. So we value them for what they can do for us, but we classify their pods as yard waste. We describe them as waste. So I was thinking a lot about accounting for value and the inherent value of some objects. In this, I was making these large grids of stacks of 10 pods and then breaking them, trying to think about how we can deconstruct some of these systems that are detrimental to other beings. Okay, so that was brief overview of my qualifying work. And then moving into my thesis work, writing has become a very important component for me. I have found that through the written word, I'm able to communicate some deeply personal and honest truths and perspectives that I can't make very clear in my visual art. So I made this booklet that hopefully someday any of you will be able to have if you want. I'm in the process of getting a number of them printed right now. But these booklets exist at the front of my exhibition. And in it, I talk about my own feelings of grief, my feelings of pain, my body issues, the trees, the Kentucky coffee trees, and my relationship with them, as well as I talk a decent amount about the erotic. And then I just want to read you this quote by Audre Lorde from her essay, Uses for the Erotic. The Erotic is Power. For as we begin to recognize our deepest feelings, we begin to give up, of necessity, being satisfied with suffering and self-negation, and with the numbness which so often seems like their only alternative in our society. Our acts against oppression become integral with self, motivated and empowered from within. In touch with the erotic, I become less willing to accept powerlessness or those other supplied states of being which are not native to me, such as resignation, despair, self-effacement, depression, self-denial. So in this written work, which includes a number of short vignettes, which are either poems or verse poems, some like prose, lyrical prose. I hope to, as the title of my show suggests, I hope to really bring all of myself into this work. So I'm going to flip through some of the pages, but I just want to read the first essay in this booklet, which reads as such. I'm only ever honest in what I make. Maybe this is why I found myself an artist. Back when lying was my survival, it was the only place that I didn't need to hide the pain, the sickness, the insecurity, the longing, the fear, the rage, the grief. And this visual candor could always somehow be explained away later. I could always say that I wasn't sure where it came from, what it was, that what they were seeing was wrong. I don't know how anyone believed me. Maybe this is why I always hated writing. I couldn't lie about the truths afterwards. Words from my deceitful tongue could not obscure the words inscribed upon the masticated bodies of trees long dead. I can't stop writing now. It's like the truths in me bubble up and burst out, explode out, and I have to rush to try to catch them before the explosion shakes my world too far to rectify back into something familiar, something I can grapple with. But the world needs to be shaken. I think that sincerity, moments of persons laid bare, fragments of dreams dreamt, hopes unhoped, fears met, longings yearned, griefs grieved, gratitudes unbound. Maybe that is all any of us can do. This is all of me, right here. This is of my making, of my dreams, hopes, fears, grief, gratitude, of me. This is me extending to you all that I have. So, as you come into the space, as you come into the gallery, on your right here is an installation of pressed leaves from the trees in a kind of circular pattern. And then on the shelf is this laser cut acrylic piece with the title, All That I Have, as well as seed packets and the booklets, which just aren't in this picture, but they will also exist on this shelf. So as you come in, you see the title and with this multiple shadow and also as a physical object. You see the leaves, which are the light receptors, the stomachs, the parts of the tree, a part of these tree bodies hung just off the wall, also creating multiple shadows and swaying as you enter the space. They catch the air current and move. And you're invited to take one of the booklets that I just showed you a little bit of and these seed packets. A large part of this work for me has been thinking about what can I give, not just to the trees, as I talked about wanting to germinate them, but to others in my community. I want to include other people in this project by offering a gift that also is a responsibility. So in this packet, which I put together with the very generous help of a number of people in our program. I think it was Jess, Alicia, Miguel, Kaliandra, Ran, and Chantel. Yeah, that was everyone. Which was, that was one of the last times I was with, physically with my community in that kind of way. I really miss everyone. So these seed packets are offered as gifts, but also as responsibility. They have 2 or 3 to 4 seeds in them. They come with instructions about how to grow the trees, and then also some conceptual thinking instructions. So as you come in, you pass those leaves and printed text pieces and seed packets. They're on your right, and as you look right in front of you, you see this installation. Okay. Yeah, you see this installation with this video projection of this video that I call, it's entitled, "I Long to Be Arboreal," as well as this large-scale print that moves through separate rooms and comes into this space and goes under and then back up on the other side. The print is woodblock cut on Japanese mulberry paper that utilizes the ghost print to fade in and out. I think the repeating ghost printing technique gives the appearance of temporal movement. The vertical stretch of this print is reminiscent of film in old projectors. The layers of ghost prints fade in and out of each other, in and out of presence and absence, and appear to come in and out of existence. And then underneath the video projection, is the mass, the pile of all of the pods that I have collected over the last couple of years. So in this first section here, let me play you some of this video. In this first section, the pods appear in 4 different ways. You see them first, and maybe most obviously, as the heavy physical presence of them in this large mound upon the ground plane with us sharing our space. You see the projected image of the pods. On the left, they are shown as they are grown as an appendage of the tree, as a part of this living being, easily suspended through fast-forwarded time. While on the right side of this video, you see me holding the trees, presenting them as both gift and burden, maybe even prayer. But you can't take them from me, so you are forced to watch me struggle, watch me endure their weight as I try to fight gravity and the pain within my physical body. And then lastly, or not lastly, but you see the pods as layers of printed absent forms carved out of a block of wood that defy gravity and ascend up the wall to the ceiling, like this. So this print, as you see here, it goes under the pods, and it does go up, but it is also being kind of crushed under the pods as it folds in to that space through this opening in the wall into this next room, which you can see here. Yeah, in this second room, I intervened upon the surface of the woodblock cut print with charcoal. So I drew by hand with the carbon residue of the burnt body of a tree, you know, with a corpse. I drew into the margin of the paper and onto the print itself. I extended the shape of the pod and the form of the wood grain into the margins of the paper. So I had never printed anything this big. I just wanted to show you a little bit of how I did it. I had to slide the paper through the press and move the wood block over and over it. And the whole print, it's in 2 segments of 15 feet. So I printed 30 feet of this print. So sharing the wall with this piece, I apologize, I don't have all the pictures of this space. I took one, I had a couple of rounds of documentation and then I haven't been able to go back. But this piece, so in this image you see on the right side there, this piece, which is made up of a number of components. One of the main ones, I call it a monolith of acrylic that is 1 foot by 3 feet tall, and it's 1 inch thick, and it's standing on the ground. On the back of that piece of acrylic, I applied layers of pod shapes that I cut out of frosted mylar. And then on the ground coming out of the monolith are 3 mirror pieces, and coming out of the back of the monolith are cast pods that I made out of pulped cardboard. So in this particular piece, I'm working with the idea of the pod through multiple forms, through multiple states. And yeah, on this wall, including that printed piece, you see multiple presentations of this one form in a way to represent how in this work I'm thinking about multiple timescales, multiple realities, and multiple worlds, those that we have forgotten and those that are yet to come. And when I was conceptualizing this piece, I intended to have the pod shapes laser cut out to be a reductive process for them to be absences within the acrylic material. But I got excited when I started to think about making these like ghost pod forms out of the frosted mylar. So the mylar layered upon itself, you can kind of see here, it creates this depth and multiple layers through the accumulation of these ghostly forms of the frosted mylar. And those mylar shapes block the light and then become absences in both the shadow and the reflected shadow cast upon the wall. Moving on to the next wall in this space, there are these 2 recessed shelf spaces now. They used to be windows that I used to present sculptural works on shelves, these kind of contained units that present 2 different ways of viewing the pod and then different ways of viewing bodies. On the right side, I created these little stands, these, like display stands out of these plexiglass straps that were gifted to me from Ragini to display these different ways that I was thinking about the body through using this pod motif. So at the very top, from the top down, I have pod shapes made out of hair, both my own and those of people close to me. Below that, I have little glass vials filled with that toxic seed pulp from the pods themselves. As you can see here is one of them. I also have 2 shelves of these pods displayed as objects chosen for their surface deformities. So some of them have these color striations and variations, and some of them have these kind of scar tissue absences taken out of them. And then at the very bottom, there are 4 pods made out of this metal mesh that is very reminiscent of medical procedures. So with this set, I was thinking about the way that we isolate certain parts of our bodies and how the medicalization of the body creates these really discrete, really specific, tight categories and labels for ourselves. On the other side of the shelf, all of these pods are broken, and all of those broken cracks are painted with gold pigment. And they're left broken. I didn't try to mend them, but just highlighting the beauty in these lines and cracks and fractures and broken pieces. And the pods here, they stand on the shelves by themselves. They have no assistance. So they share space with each other, and they are in the same space with us. And as you move, as you keep turning to view the show, the work in the room, there's this piece, which is a hanging fallen branch from a Kentucky coffee tree that I found, I think it was last summer. And it is suspended by this metal piece that I've made out of scrap metal in the UNM sculpture department. That comes down from the skylight that you can just kind of see in this picture almost, where it punctures the branch and suspends it in space. Yeah, you can see that here. It's this violent action. I was thinking about how can I make pain visible? What visual metaphors can I use to express the feeling of pain, which is an invisible feeling in my body? This is a picture of where that limb broke off of that tree. I go back and visit it, and it still looks raw. It's really visceral for me to look at this. But in the show, I presented this branch, being suspended again, but in this distorted way, the upside down branch. And then the pieces are really held together with this tight wrapping, this bonding of cotton twine. And then behind the twine piece is a cast that I made of the branch. It's with cardboard pulped paper that comes, it's on the ground like a shadow, and then goes up the wall. And then the last piece in this space is what you see here, a large scale print that lists the gifted materials. So in this show, which inherently thinks about extinction and those beings that were lost, it's becoming increasingly more prevalent in scientific theories that the Quaternary extinction event, which resulted in the extinction of megafauna on this continent that we now refer to as North America, was the result of anthropogenic destruction of these species. So as humans came here, megafauna died. So thinking about extinction, I can't not think about capitalism and imperialism. In Extinction, A Radical History by Ashley Dawson, he says that, quote, extinction cannot be understood in isolation from a critique of capitalism and imperialism. So in order to critique this system where money is everything and every being, every landscape becomes commodity, I wanted to work really actively with this idea of gifting, maybe not as a way to think about another form of economy, but just as another way of even thinking about and seeing the world and seeing our day-to-day lives. And as a daily practice in which that asks us to slow down and appreciate all that is given to us. So on this gift list, I include the parts of the tree that I collected. So I include the seeds and the pods and the leaves and the branch and the seed pulp. I include all of those as gifts. I also include materials that I found, whether they were on the free table in the biology building or in the Maddox, or if I found them on the side of the street. So in my essay, I say this about gifting. To dwell upon gifts, both the giving and receiving of them, and expand our perception of this classification, is to spend time outside the quotidian violence of capitalism. When all that is received is a gift, all that you do is a gift, all that you make is a gift. Every interaction becomes a gift. You become bonded with the world, committed to every being in a living, breathing, reciprocal, fluid exchange. So in this piece, this is the only part of the show where I am directly addressing gifting. And I list almost every material in the show. I did buy a few things, but the vast majority of it are gifted materials. So that is everything in that room here. And this is the view. If you're standing where the view of this photo was taken, just to your right is the tree branch, and just to your left is the print on the wall, and then the monolith with shadows, and behind you are the shelves with the small sculptures and the video projection, which I just now realized I forgot to mention, but there's a video projection of me breaking open the seeds between the two shelves. So from this view, you can see into the last room in the space, which is where the trees themselves are present. Those trees that I have been growing are here in this show in these cast paper pots that I made out of pulped cardboard that I pulled out of the recycling. And these trees are illuminated with two different colors, two different tones of grow light, and they are each suspended on a shelf of bent acrylic. The acrylic was a gift from Desert Acrylics in Albuquerque, and the use of the bender was a gift of Rogany. And so moving into this space, this is where in this room is where I'm really thinking about grief and death. Grieving both those beings that have been lost and the world's landscapes and realities that were lost through extinctions that have already been passed, but I'm also grieving and mourning for futures that will not exist, for what we are going to lose. There's a quote from Arts of Living on a Damaged Planet that I want to read. It says that, quote, "Ghosts remind us that we live in an impossible present, a time of rupture, a world haunted with the threat of extinction. So throughout this show, I make absences present in a variety of forms, utilizing ghost prints, shadows, reflections, projections of being out of time, casted objects, writings, and the pods themselves. In doing so, I am thinking not only about pasts that are lost, but also futures. What will soon become absent? What will we miss, and how will we grieve? So this room includes the installation of, let's see, these, the trees themselves and those cast paper pods, some of which are breaking because, you know, they're paper holding together damp soil and trees that need to be watered. So some of them are held together with that same cotton twine that was wrapped upon the fallen branch that is suspended in the other room. And then some of the casts I made intentionally to be too fragile to really hold anything. So they become these hollow spaces where you are asked to look inside of them and see what light comes through them. There is also this bound, shrouded figure. The figure is meant to be vaguely human, and it is filled with broken pod pieces. So those pieces of waste, pieces of things that are already broken that I mourned. I really love the pods, so breaking them was a really difficult, really painful act for me. And in presenting the pods this way, I'm asking us to think about what needs to be broken, even if we have to mourn it. What needs to break in this world so that we can imagine these other potential futures. You can also see on the other side, wait, here, I just wanted to show an image of, I lost a lot of these pots that I made when I transplanted the trees into them. And some of these broken pots are on the ground beneath the installation of the pots and trees on the wall. Just to the right, as you look at that, those trees on the wall, is this installation here, which is the pile of all the seeds that I have collected. And then embedded in that pile of seeds is a monitor playing a video that, because of the size of it, I couldn't fit into, oh my gosh, my slideshow. So I'm just gonna play it for you here quickly. So I wanted to present documentation of some of my interactions with the trees and the process of collecting throughout the last couple of years. So this video is embedded, I apologize, embedded in that giant pile of seeds. I'm thinking again about multiple timescales. This is the second time in this show that I have a 2-channel video playing with time and the speed of the video being played. It's a long video that is on a loop on that monitor on the ground. And you see me collecting the seeds throughout the seasons and throughout time. So let me go back now here. Okay, I apologize that I couldn't fit that in. My internet in my house has been rather unhappy. On the wall, adjacent to, on the other side of this corner where this structure, the structure of this pile is this piece mounted on the wall. It is a dead seedling that I placed in this wooden box. I was thinking about caretaking as an action that is not innocuous. It is filled with risk, both to oneself and to those who we are caring for. Um, while death is an essential part of life that is really beautiful, it is nourishing, it is also really difficult and yeah. Okay, so the last piece is this installation of 3 prints that are held up with clamps, C-clamps, small C-clamps are held off the wall, and a mirror with a pod that shadow is being reflected. So these are another series of woodblock cuts on Japanese mulberry paper. So the paper is made from tree pulp, from tree bodies, not from cotton, which a lot of printmaking paper is. And the woodblock cut print is obviously made of wood as well. And it is printed straight as inked and then flipped and inversed with the ghost print there. And then I wanted to show how I got that shape. I made the shape in these prints by tracing the reflected absence of light caused by a pod and its shadow. So I show that here in this mirror piece in relation to the prints. So that is that's the show. It's hard, as well as I tried to describe a lot of these works, I intended them to be affective, a very emotional experience based upon where they are in relation to each other, and the sounds that you hear from the video pieces being played in the different spaces. So as well as I can try to describe them, I really hope that you'll be able to go see the show and experience it in the way that I intended you to. I just want to say, while diving into this work, I really attempted to at no point anthropomorphize these trees that I had been working with in both the visual arts and the writing pieces. I am attempting to make larger spaces for trees in our minds, allowing trees and other more than human beings to fill that space. Notions of human exceptionalism and the rigid lines that we draw between the human and everything else creates tight boxes around beings, around what we expect of them, and how we assume they live. But in this work, I'm trying to imagine what it would be like if we erased those lines and expanded those spaces around these more than human species and individuals, and without expectation, we allowed those beings to show us who they are. By getting rid of the boundaries between us, we can listen and be with others in a truly present and honest way. And through this presence, we may allow ourselves to see the world and those in it in ways that we never imagined possible. But before we can even get there, we have to get rid of those ideological boxes that we draw and we use to contain each other and others in this world with us. And I think that this is where awe and imagination and curiosity come in. There are so many things that we as humans can't know about other beings, especially vegetal lives that live so differently from us, but we can't even know them about other humans, really. And it is through giving in and allowing in awe and allowing space for imagination that we can give others those space to be who they are. and maybe we can imagine a better world together. I'll play this one more time. I just want to end on this quote by from Dr. Kim Tallbear in the essay Making Love and Relations Beyond Settler Sex in the collection Making Kin Not Population, that says, quote, "How does the different sustenance I gain from multiple lovers collectively fortify me and make me more available to contribute in the world? If I am richly fed, what and who am I able to feed? What is possible with a model in which love and relations are not considered scarce objects to be hoarded and protected, but which proliferate beyond the confines of socially constituted couple and nuclear family?" I love the Kentucky coffee tree and those individuals that I have spent so much time with. And I hope through this work, I help others see the ways that they can love and be loved by more than human beings. And here's my bibliography. Okay, you can pause this and look at it more. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to someday hopefully being in dialogue with you all and answering any questions you have about this work and the research that went into it. Thank you, and I don't know, have a great quarantine day. Okay.